Left town with the only purple altar runner we have. So we're using white again, but I want to tell you a story that goes back to my old days. Back prior to Vatican II, which was, what was it, 1968, 64, 68, something like that. Anyway, prior to Vatican II, Catholics were required to eat fish on Friday. So, this joke dates me because it takes us back to those pre-Vatican II days, which is a long time ago. But it reminds me this way. There was a Methodist who had converted to Catholicism. And the priest had a lot of trouble with him, getting him to understand he's a Catholic now. And he kept saying, just repeat to yourself, I am not a Methodist, I am a Catholic. I am not a Methodist, I am a Catholic. Well, Father Mulcahy was out one Saturday afternoon, walking the neighborhood, doing his rounds. And he's walking down the sidewalk, and this new parishioner's side wall fence is right here. And over that wall is drifting some barbecue smoke that doesn't smell like fish. So Father Mulcahy walks down the sidewalk a little bit, finds a knothole in the fence, he looks through, and there's his new parishioner in there. You are not a steak, you are a fish. That is not white, that is purple.
Looks right to me.
There you go. Today's homily is about anticipation. In fact, I've called it anticipation. It seems appropriate for an Advent word, don't you think? I mean, we're looking forward, we're preparing, we're anticipating something. Anticipation is usually a very positive word. You know, I don't have a joyful anticipation of somebody punching me in the nose or giving me a cold cup of coffee. That's something you dread, or that you're afraid will happen. But I anticipate Christmas, family, gifts, love, friends, coming to church. We use anticipation as a positive term. Well, Advent is a period of anticipation, of preparation for what's coming. It's the church's season of looking forward to reliving and celebrating once again the birth of the Christ child. And so today, with anticipation, with excitement and joyful expectancy, we're beginning our new Advent journey that will lead us to Christmas. Now, the lectionary gives us essentially, it's a little loose here and there, but essentially we get 4 readings for each Sunday of the year. An Old Testament, which is generally a prophet, a psalm, an epistle, one of the letters of the apostles to the church, and one of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. Now that's just generally the way it's done. Sometimes you'll find that instead of an epistle you'll get a reading from Revelation or something. But essentially that's the lay of the land. Well, today we got 3 of those out of the 4. We did not get the epistle. So we're going to bring the epistle into this as well. But I want to tell you at the outset that all 4 of these readings, each in its own way, leads us to the same point. Now they're all quite different, but each leads us to the same point. And at the end, I think you'll understand what I'm saying. So let's go into a little scriptural exegesis. Now that's just another fancy way of saying that, you know, we're going to kind of deconstruct some of the scriptures and talk about some of the stuff that's in them and put it together again, okay? And I'm going to start with the gospel, with Matthew, and I'm going to work back. Because in fact, I'm building up. I love this reading from Isaiah. So I want to build up to that. Beginning with Matthew. This passage, apart from Advent, this passage is preached as a warning. It's a judgment passage. It's used in a way I don't necessarily agree with as a, you better be afraid, you better watch out, you better be cowering. It's used that way. But for that reason, it seems like maybe it's out of place at the beginning of Advent. Now, don't look at it now. Listen to me. Unfortunately, you need to do that. But later on, look at the other flip side of your Advent litany. Because Pastor David has done a good job there of providing for us an understanding of these scriptures and how they're used together for Advent. So yes, that is a judgment passage, but I'm going to suggest to you it's a lot more than that. I'm going to suggest to you that's a very positive passage. Now, it's not just these verses we read today. If you can go back in the 24th chapter, if you go back maybe starting about the 23rd verse, and you'll find Christ saying a lot there, beginning to say a lot there about his second coming, about the Son of Man and the final coming. And it goes on from there. And then you get to the 35th verse, just before where we took off today with our gospel reading, the 35th verse of Matthew 24 says to us that this is not just for this generation. This is for all time. I'm not just saying this for some future generations, but for all of you. Then he goes ahead and he says, with today's words, no one knows the day and the hour, not even the Son. That means himself. Not even the Son, but only the Father knows. Christ is telling us there that, yeah, acknowledge that there is a point of accounting. There is a point of judgment. But that is not upon us now. That comes later. Okay, well that kind of leaves us with now. We stand in a gap. That's where we come in. Now, the now is where we have the opportunity to love and to serve as Christ has taught us to. It's up to us how we live, what we do, how we prepare. Well, let's see what Paul says about it. I'm going to go now to the epistle, which we didn't hear. It's a short one. I am going to read today's epistle to you. Romans 13, 11 through 14. You know what time it is, how it is now the moment for you to wake from sleep. For salvation is nearer to us now than when we became believers. The night is far gone, the day is near. Let us then lay aside the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us live honorably as in the day, not in reveling and drunkenness, not in debauchery and licentiousness, not in quarreling and jealousy. Instead, put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to gratify its desires. I see Paul in this passage explaining the gospel to us as an opportunity, not as something to make us fear for our future. Paul says some awfully positive things. Wake up from your sleep. Daytime is near. Lay aside works of darkness. Put on the armor of light. Live honorably in the daylight, not in the darker things in our lives that we tend to hide in the night to do. In other words, Paul's encouraging us to live as Christ taught, loving and caring for others, remembering that, in fact, we are our sisters' and brothers' keeper. We are humanity's good Samaritans. We are the Spirit of the Christ living in us, who welcomes the immigrant, feeds the hungry, houses the homeless, cares for the sick and the dying. Those are the things that make up the armor of light that Paul is talking about. Paul is encouraging us to accept Christ's offer to accompany us, to live in us and through us, and to allow Him to be reborn in us each time we encounter someone who needs us. We're being invited to live our todays into a better tomorrow. Now, we can look at these two scriptures either way, as warnings of judgment, something that makes us afraid, or as a promise of hope. And it depends on our attitude. It depends really on what we are hoping for. Are we looking for, fearing, dreading an awful judgment at the end? Or are we joyfully seeking, asking for, anticipating Christ's company with us along our way? Christ's gospel isn't issuing a threat, it's making an offer. It's issuing us an invitation. It's giving us the opportunity to wait, look, seek, hope for the joy-giving revelation of Jesus, the God with us, walking with us in our lives. Both Matthew's gospel and Paul's letter to the Romans say to us, keep your eye on the prize, look ahead, build the future, have hope, don't fear judgment, live joyfully into a blessed eternity as the Christ who lives in you. Now, as positive and hopeful as I believe today's gospel message is, our reading from Isaiah strikes me as the most encouraging, the most uplifting of all of our readings. It gives a word picture, in my mind at least, a word picture, a visual. It says, let's go to the mountain of the Lord's house. Let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. Up. Let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. Why? Isaiah says, so that He may teach us, that we may walk in His paths. And as we do that, He will arbitrate between all of us. His judgment will be so sweet for those who love God that they will find themselves living in peace, beating their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks, and there be no more wars. If that isn't uplifting and joyful, I don't know what is. If that isn't what we need now to focus on more than ever, I don't know what is. As we heard the psalmist say today, we will be glad. That's a happy dance word. We will be glad to go into the house of the Lord. Peace will be within our walls, and quietness within our towers. God will oversee our prosperity. That's hope. That's real hope. That's what the world needs. That's what we need. And that's what Advent brings us. Back to what I said earlier. All four of these readings, each in its own way, leads us to the same point. What's common to these readings is this. They push us forward. They drive us towards our spiritual future. They reveal to us an anticipation that's grounded in hope. They give us encouragement to seek God's will, to follow God's guidance, to seek grace by sharing grace. And that's the message of Advent. That's the Christ being born anew, over and over and over again in each of us by our loving and caring for others. And so we begin our Advent not fearful, not despairing, not even worried, but filled with the hope and anticipation of the Christ who is being reborn in us. Our readings urge hope. They warn against complacency, against lukewarmness, apathy, and inattention. They point us to something better. They point us to a better world, a better future, a closer relationship with God and with all creation. So let us enter Advent with hope, with purpose, with intent, humbly, yet boldly, without fear, but with faith that the Christ is about to be reborn in us. As Pastor David noted in your handout, Advent looks in two directions: at Jesus' first coming in the stable in Bethlehem, and at his second coming at the end of time. I would add to that explanation this: that we must live in the tension between those two times. We must live that time that we have as the extraordinary people that we are, a people who carry the Spirit of Christ, the Spirit of hope within us. And it is we who bear that to the world. Hope is the takeaway today. Joyful, anticipatory, fearless hope. That's your takeaway. Happy Advent. May we each leave here to begin our Advent journey filled with a sense of anticipation, a sense that our tomorrows are defined by the hope we have in us and the hope that we share with others today. Amen. We're going to sing our invitation hymn in a moment.